Tough day today, folks. Not gonna lie. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Greetings, friends. Word spread this morning of news of Scott Adams passing. Scott was, let me tell you something. If you did not follow Scott Adams, he was one of the great intellectual thinkers and free thinkers of our time. Adams, of course, created the Dilbert cartoon and became, he was already famous, very famous before 2016. But in 2016, he did something that was dangerous to do at the time. He was a prominent, mainstream person who stuck his neck out for Trump. Very few people did this. He recognized that the country needed some kind of a reset, some kind of a reboot, and he recognized that the Trump promise of doing just that was what we needed. But it was a tremendous, and people don't realize this now, that he was able to climb back to a position of prominence. What Scott did was he flushed his entire career down the drain. You know, he had his cartoon, and this is important. You know, in the 1990s, when I was a teenager growing up, the Dilbert cartoon was epic. When I entered the workforce as a 19-year-old, we would be sharing in office cubicles Dilbert. I mean, this is what people would put up and share. And I guess, I saw it described somewhere as a silent protest against corporate culture. I mean, it really wasn't a protest against corporate culture as much as it was against idiots. People that, as Adams put it, would get promoted up into positions that they were undeserving of. I think he said once that it's people get promoted into management, useless people, because it's where they can do the least amount of damage. And so, but in the 90s, everybody was talking about this. And by the time 2016 rolled around, when we had a pivotal election year, Adams was, schedule was full of speaking arrangements, agreements. It was out there, doing consulting, had many, his obviously Dilbert and I think 2,000 newspapers internationally. I mean, this was just somebody who was bringing in millions of dollars, and it went to almost zero at one point. And it started with supporting Trump. And because, by the way, because he supported Trump and because Scott Adams came out and took that stand, everything else he did, no matter how true or how correct or how decent, got attacked by these ghoulish leftists. And it's all coming back today. And I think, no, I'm not angry about it anymore. In the wake of Charlie Kirk, I'm not angry. As much as I am, well, I still have contempt. I'm also bemused by it. I saw a few people, including Cernovich, say this, and it's good because I sounded off. You saw there was a People magazine, among others, wrote an obit announcing Scott's death, and they wrote that, Adams was a disgraced, racist cartoonist. And by the way, I'll get into this because facts to me matter, but it's just a standard operating procedure for these people. If Adams was a supporter of Hillary Rodham Clinton, if Adams was a supporter of Joe Biden, Adams could say anything he wants. He could say things that are so incredibly racist, but of course he'd never get called out for being a racist. The way this all works is very simple. If you are a conservative, and if you are an effective conservative, they will come after you and destroy you by any means necessary. You have a target on your back. And the best thing you can do, when you are an effective conservative communicator is to win, to grow your audience, to double down and fight. I'm looking at these, I guess that's the reason why I'm bemused by these horrible things that these awful folks in the media are writing today about Scott Adams, is that it was all predictable. He would be laughing at it too. It's what low IQ, highly emotional, and reactive people do. And by the way, if you come out and you defend Scott Adams, if you come out and you say, no, that's not how it was, it's not what he said, think about this. How is that racist? They turn around and they point their finger and say, well, you're racist too. You're defending him because you're a racist. It's what they did with Charlie Kirk. It's what they did with Rush Limbaugh. It's what they do with everybody. You're defending a racist, Sam. Ergo, you too are a racist POS. I wear that slur, that horrible slur, with pride coming from these morons. But that's where we are in this country. And so one of the things that I'll just was devastating this morning, I was driving into work and put on Coffee with Scott Adams, his ex-wife, with whom apparently he had a very good relationship, to the extent that she actually came and took care of him at the end of his life, came on and spoke and shared a letter that Scott Adams had left behind, that he had written on the first. I'm going to play this here. This is exactly what everybody heard who tuned in this morning to listen to Scott Adams, Coffee with Scott Adams.
Unfortunately, this isn't good news. Of course, he waited till just before the show started, but he's not with us right anymore. He has a final message that he wanted to say. If you are reading this, things did not go well for me. I have a few things to say before I go. My body failed before my brain. I am of sound mind as I write this January 1st, 2026. Many of my Christian friends have asked me to find Jesus before I go. I'm not a believer, but I have to admit the risk-reward calculation for doing so looks so attractive to me. So here I go. I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior and look forward to spending an eternity with him. The part about me not being a believer should be quite quickly resolved if I wake up in heaven. I won't need any more convincing than that. I hope I'm still qualified for entry.
Even in his darkest hour, facing death, Scott was hilarious. Now, I'm no theologian. I can't answer whether this gets you through the pearly gates or not, but Adams was a good man, someone who influenced many for better, someone who got people to think, to open their minds, the exact opposite of these terrible liberal trolls who today mock his death. Brings me back this, I don't know if you have the same impression, just brings me back to that terrible morning when Rush passed away and Catherine got on air to read a prepared statement, and those words that just cut through us. This is not the Limbaugh you hope to hear from today. Yes, we have lost over the last several years some great Americans. Yes, even in the last little while, some of the largest influencers, thought leaders, brave patriots have been leaving us. But you know what we need to remember? The other side is so pathetic. They have to pay people to show up at protests. They have to buy off media companies to get their message out. They have to corrupt entire institutions to win elections. And our people do it and manage to turn a profit. Because the message of freedom, the message of opportunity, the message of independence, of free thought, drowns out every bit of communist, socialist, slave mentality that the Democratic Party has to offer. And one thing I can say, it's not clear yet fully, and it will be in due time, but one thing that is absolutely certain to me is that Scott Adams trained a new generation of thought leaders, of standard bearers, of inspiration for our movement. And for that, he has, wherever he is, whether up in heaven or not, our eternal gratitude. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Friends, I'll be right back.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam and Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
Hi, Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. This hour of the program brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. So today we celebrate the life of Scott Adams, Dilbert creator, internet dad is how many refer to him. Coffee with Scott Adams every morning on X, on Rumble, was a digital show. And it was just a conversation. It was just Scott talking to people and sharing his thoughts. And it became a must-do, must-attend event for many across the world. It's absolutely, it's what it was. By the way, he's great quotes that he had over the years. There's few of his quotes that stand out to me. One time he said, creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep. You can never underestimate the stupidity of the general public. And those of you who are mechanically inclined, for you, I leave this one. Engineers like to solve problems. If there are no problems handily available, they will create their own problems. That's definitely true. You've seen when engineers go amok. And I've got a brother-in-law who's an engineer. Two of them, as a matter of fact, they're great guys. But anyway, Scott Adams will be greatly missed. I mentioned in my open today that he had suffered greatly following his endorsement of Trump in 2016. Back then, telling people that you were a Trump person was, it was toxic. I remember those early days. When Trump first came on the scene, it was people said, "Oh, he doesn't have a chance." So nothing really. If you came out, and I did, I remember early on the radio saying, "This is the guy." I got attacked by conservatives, by the way. But the Jeb people all lost their minds. Their hair lit on fire. And other hosts at the time, other talk show hosts, were more circumspect and stayed out of the primary process. And I was an early supporter of Trump and put my money where my mouth is. I was one of the top donors to Trump in the early first quarter cycle and all the way back in the 2016 race. But as Trump got more successful, here's my point. Supporting him became more toxic because the left began to really fear him. So they were throwing everything at him. the slurs of him being a Russian agent, a rapist, a racist, all the stuff. I mean, it was all out there. And here, back in 2016, Scott Adams was talking to Jake Tapper about his career, what happened to him following his endorsement of Donald J. Trump.
You, because you've been a Trumpologist and also seem in many instances to have supported Donald Trump, you have experienced something of a backlash, even when it comes to speaking engagements. Is that right?
Yeah, so my speaking engagements dried up since I started talking about Trump. They went to zero. That's how many I have on the books right now. But people also came to Amazon and gave me one-star reviews on my book and said it's because of Trump. And people said they were calling newspapers to get Dilbert kicked out of newspapers, that sort of thing. And now when I go out to try to get funding for my startup, I don't know how hard that's going to be, so my timing might be bad there. But overall, it was also the most fun year I've ever had in my life, and totally worth it. And if I could be part of letting the public see their options a little more clearly, that's good. And I would say on Veterans Day, if anybody wants to find a way to meet in the middle, donate to a veterans organization. It's the one thing everybody agrees on. And it's about time to look for some common ground now.
But they didn't want to look for common ground. They never do. If you come out swinging for them, if you just take a stand, if you don't, as an independent-minded person, get the memo that you're not supposed to support Trump or whoever because they're racist, bigots, etc., etc. If you don't heed that call, you are somebody to be destroyed. By the way, I really sympathize, Robbie, to his comment about his books on Amazon. Do you know how many people go to my business to go to Sam and Ash and leave bad reviews or post stuff on Reddit and other platforms? It is damaging to business. And they'll say terrible things about me, but when you finally get into it, has nothing to do with me being, my legal work, which I'm an outstanding lawyer, but if I might say so, but it has everything to do with politics. They don't like my politics, so they try to attack my livelihood. These people are terrorists. That's what they are. And by the way, that's where, that's where this thing, where do I have it here? I have the headline today. Well, all the different announcements and obits out there were terrible. Scott Adams, disgraced Dilbert creator, dies at 68. People magazine. People. Right? This is what, I guess, who reads People magazine? What is a magazine? Right? That's what Scott would ask. What's a magazine? I don't even know what that is. So, first paragraph. Everything that Scott Adams did. Scott Adams has died at the age of 68. Adams first published Dilbert, a comic strip that satirized life in white-collar offices. In 1989, the comic strip became ubiquitous. In the 1990s, Dilbert was pulled from wide circulation after Adams degraded black people in a 2023 rant. People have thankfully looked up the writers of this article. They're all, you just look at the pictures, right? It's absolute ghouls, left-wing radicals. And this is what they do. They just put their bile up on the page. This is nonsense. Adams had a data-driven point. You know what his entire point, just so we're clear about this, there had been a survey that came out that found that almost half of Black America responded in the survey that white people shouldn't be, proud to be white. And he said, look, when you combine that with all the videos and instances of people getting attacked for their race who are white by people of color, hey, just, get out of the way. Stay clear. That was the so-called racist rant. I've got it here in my queue. Maybe I'll play it here. I'll just play it. You be the judge. I'll do it after this break. Scott Adams, Dilbert creator, friend to many, thought leader, dead today at 68. Absolutely devastating. Sam Mirejovsky, I'll be back in a moment. Friends, I just spoke with a client who his son actually got into a car accident. 18-year-old son, accident, first accident he's ever in. And the lady obviously at fault, cut in front of him, and now she begins to lie, right? She lies to the cops. She lies to the DMV, right? She lies to everybody, trying to turn this around on the teen, which is nonsense. Just got some good news today. A liability decision has been decided on this and ruled in favor of our client. So that's that. The insurance company's got to cover it. And this is one of the things I'm trying to explain to each and every one of you when I talk about Sam and Ash injury law. You might think you can go at it alone. You might think it's easy to just send some documents and some paperwork. You're in the right, after all. Not so fast. They do like to take advantage. They will screw you over. They will do everything in their power to save money. And the other part of it is they're going to exhaust you with the work required to get everything done. That's a huge part of this. They're just going to absolutely get you worn out. Text messages even. Right now, they text you on your phone. Obnoxious. Don't do that. Sam and Ash injury law. Don't waste your time and don't lose money. Don't end up upside down at the end of your case. Hire Sam and Ash injury law today, the only law firm to trust for your injury case. And spread the word. Tell your family and friends that they shouldn't go at it alone either. Any kind of injury, we can help. And we'll be honest with you. We'll tell you, hey, maybe you don't need a lawyer, but here are the 3 things you ought to do. But getting that advice is essential. Sam and Ash injury law. 800-304-2000. No upfront fee, no upfront cost, no recovery, no fee. Easy. samandashlaw.com. That's the website. Sam and Ash injury law. Because you deserve what's right. Now, I'm going to get to today, I promise, Bruce, I saw your email. I'm going to get to the Supreme Court oral arguments today on the transgender athletes case. This is very interesting to me, but I have a broader commentary on it, of course, which is it's not just about the legal battles. Well, I'll just give you a quick preview of it. It's not just about the legal battles. The courts oftentimes are a reflection of public sentiment. The most important battle is for hearts and minds. The legal stuff comes later, and at that time, it's almost over. And if you doubt me, I'll give you some good examples of this, but I'm going to do it in a moment. And to that end, the people that stick their necks out and fight, the Scott Adams of the world, right? Dilbert creator who passed away today. These people who go out and take their entire lives, their professional lives, and are willing to give it up to shift the Overton window, to move public opinion and change public opinion. These are the real heroes of the Republic. And by the way, that's part of what this takes. It takes just somebody to stand up and say an obvious truth. With transgender athletes, Riley Gaines stood up and said, this isn't right. Now, the response from the left was ridicule, hatred. There are people out there, and it's not an insignificant number, who would kill Riley Gaines if they could. So Riley has given up her life as she knew it, an ordinary, safe, comfortable existence for the sake of moving public opinion, for the sake of protecting girls in sport. I hate to break it. I'm saying this, folks, I'm saying this as an attorney. if you're hung up on what the courts are and are not doing, if you've missed it. The courts oftentimes rule based on what public opinion is. That's a fact. That's why you hear people like John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, talk about the legitimacy of the court. What does legitimacy of the court even mean, right? So we'll get more into that in these arguments. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and we're certainly moving in the right direction. Speaking of opinion, right? This is I'm just before the break. I mentioned that Scott Adams today, after his passing, is being eulogized by crazy leftists as a racist. This is what they do. They don't like what you have to say. They delegitimize you with a smear, and then anybody that comes to your defense is called a racist too. So I guess I'm coming to Scott Adams' defense. So cue the haters. I'm going to have a bunch of people tomorrow declaring me a racist. The comments that got Scott Adams into trouble, quote unquote, happened almost 3 years ago on X in February of 2023. Scott was reacting to a Rasmussen Reports poll. Now, this poll, and Robbie, thank you for correcting me, just not in time because I already had said it, couldn't pull the words back. You're right. The wording of it is worse than I presented it at the bottom of the hour. I said that this poll asked Black Americans whether it was okay for white people to be proud of their race. That's not what they asked. It was far lower of a threshold. The poll asked respondents whether they agreed, and this was a poll of a variety of races, but this is what they asked. Is it's okay to be white? That's the phrase. Agree or disagree with that statement? And what is this? 47% of Black respondents disagreed or weren't sure whether it's okay to be white. That's like, is it okay to exist as a white person? So Scott reacting to this poll, well, I'll just play it for you. This is what he said.
So if nearly half of all blacks are not okay with white people, according to this poll, not according to me, according to this poll, that's a hate group. That's a hate group. And I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people. Just get the f*** away. Wherever you have to go, just get away. Because there's no fixing this. This can't be fixed. All right, this can't be fixed. You just have to escape.
Now, I mean, it's just based on, he said I didn't come up with this poll, but if half of the people responding to this poll hate me just for my race, that's pretty bigoted, no? Who's the racist here? Do you actually, I'm going to ask you a question. Like, this is just a thought. Do you dislike anybody based on their race? I don't. But if there's a particular group of people out there and half of them or 47% of them or whatever it is are like, yeah, I don't like white people, then I'm going to be a little concerned, aren't you? And this right here, the left used to go after Adams and absolutely destroy him. This is when his remaining comics, Dilbert comics, were stripped, and he basically had to completely redo his business model. This is what they do. And side note, the part that irks me about this is that Obama, who was supposed to be the post-racial America, a healing president, did more to stir up racial hatred in our country than any other president, certainly in my lifetime, before him. And everywhere you go, it's the Democratic Party. It's the American left that always separates us and talks about race and why this group is victimized by that group and vice versa. They're the ones stirring up this racial animus. The real bigots, the real racists are the very same vile people here throwing these slurs around at Scott Adams and others. It is classic deflection. I mean, think about it. Do Republicans spend time agonizing about race? No. What did they say? Remember Charlie Kirk? Charlie Kirk was a racist. There's some number of idiots out there following Charlie's assassination. Came out as a vile racist. Why? Charlie said to a larger audience than I have the same thing that I have been saying. He actually talked about black pilots. That's what he said. I'm a little concerned. I care about merit. I don't want to be on an airplane flown by a person who has been put in that position by virtue of his race, not by virtue of his score on the test or his aptitude for flying. You know what I've always said? I'm just going to say it here. What I always say is there's two planes. They're both they're side-by-side gates. You're equidistant from them. They cost the same. You have a ticket on both flights. You're not going to get a refund or anything. You've got two choices. One airplane, and they're both going to the same place at the same time. And one plane is flown by a crew where the positions went to the best people. Top 10%. And the second crew, the second plane, is flown by a crew that has where a focus by the HR people is on diversity. They care about diversity. Now, be honest. Which plane do you want to get on? By the way, the plane that has the merit could have two black pilots. I don't care about that. I care that that's the plane where they know how to fly. Because when I get on a plane, I want to go up, stay up, and then at the appropriate time, go down. Not too quickly. I just want to kind of just land, get on that glide slope for those pilots out there. Get on that glide slope and just touch down right in, where I need to on the runway. I choose life. That's it. And that's all Charlie Kirk said. And that quote is dug up, and it's just like the Renee Good shooting. I'm telling you that you can show the video to 10 leftists and go, look, thump, bang, bang, and they will see something completely different because they are absolutely invested in their narrative. And their narrative is not about truth. It's not about objectivity. It's about raw political power. I keep saying that because it's 1,000% true. Raw political power. So that's that. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Be back in a moment, folks. 294 days until the midterm elections. Folks, this is going to be upon us quicker than we realize. That's only 42 weeks. So, got a lot of work cut out for us. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. I had a thought today, and I'm not saying that this is what is happening, okay? I just have a thought. Many of you are irked that Pam Bondi hasn't set up, Nuremberg trials yet for the various apparatchiks of the Biden administration, right? The very thought that we have, some people did some bad things, not just around January 6th, not just the lawfare perpetrated against Trump himself and his supporters, but the actual harm done to the country. I mean, Alejandro Mayorkas, right? This guy just opened the gates to the country. He opened the gates, said, come on in. Trenderegua, welcome to America. We're not going to look. We're just going to look the other way. And people died. Children are still missing. Great harm to the country. And then there's the fraud. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I didn't mention it yesterday very much. It doesn't mean it's not still, that story is still rolling. But by the way, full speed ahead on it, because it seems it's, every time I blink and every time I get an update, the story's just bigger than it is. And I think to some extent it's going to be momentous. So when we're talking about the midterms, I had this thought. Perhaps the Trump people are going to do to the Democrats what the Democrats did to Trump. Now, what do I mean by this? If you were going to exploit the revelations of wrong done by the Democratic Party, many in it, the last administration, certain members of Congress perhaps, when would you want to time that crescendo, so to speak? When would you want it to hit? I don't know. End of summer? October? September? You know, people who study politics could, as I do, right, would have different opinions. I would say September, early October, but really have it build up before then. And then every month, every 2 weeks, you've got a big arrest, a big indictment, just boom, boom, boom. Now, I don't know that that's what's going to happen, but if we start to see a bunch of indictments beginning in late spring, early summer, if we start to see that snowball roll, I'm telling you, then it will become, I know, well, it's what they did to him. It's what they did to Trump. You thinking it's petty. I'm not saying it's not petty, but this is, okay, everything bad that Trump did, quote unquote, right, that the left accused him of doing, was known in the immediate aftermath of his presidency. I mean, when did the J6 indictment, when did the incitement indictment come down? Not in 2021. They waited for the primary cycle to begin. They wanted to damage Trump first with the Republican Party and prevent him from even getting the nomination. They wanted to clear the field. This was election interference at its finest. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Bring it on. I used to be more conciliatory once upon a time. I don't think I have a conciliatory bone in my body anymore. I don't know, something, the people that are writing today, rest in piss, Scott Adams. The people that wrote that about Charlie Kirk as his widow was clutching his poor kids, who for the rest of their lives will see video and photographs of their father's head getting blown off by some whacked out Reddit reading fanatic tranny. Yeah, I'm not feeling very conciliatory with you all. You have to forgive me. And then when you think about the heist, you think about what happened in 2020 in the election. Just wait. We're going to learn a lot more about that this year. But what was very obvious was the way that the Biden administration, the Department of Justice, worked together with the political operatives in the Biden. They're all the same. They're all political operatives. They worked together to completely derail Trump. And thank goodness, right? What was their big miscalculation? What was the Democrats' big miscalculation? I love to say this because it's so beautiful. they thought Republicans were as dumb as Democrats. That's really the truth, right? They thought that the Republicans would go, oh, okay, we're done. You know what happened to me? Those of you listening to the program, I thought Trump's first term was not as successful as I wanted it to be. I was a little tired of Trump. Then they indicted him. First they raided his home. They raided Mar-a-Lago. My God, do you remember me in that time? I lost my mind. I went from, this other guy's, Ramaswamy guy's interested. I swung back to Trump like that, along with so many of you that were on the fence. And that's precisely miscalculated. Thought we roll over and play dead like the other side. No chance. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Folks, I'll be right back. This just in, the Washington Post editorial board writing, trans athletes head to the Supreme Court. Neither science nor the American public is on their side. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. I am Nevada's favorite recovering Californian. Great to be here with you as always, Monday through Friday on the What's Right Media Network. Here's the very first line of the piece, okay? And I quote, "The Supreme Court has the chance this weekend to save women's sports, allowing states to restore a level playing field for girls by excluding biological men and thereby correcting one of the worst excesses of America's cultural revolution." From the Washington Post, people. Now, today, the Supreme Court has heard arguments that seem to, based on how they're going, will uphold transgender athlete bans. A pair of cases from Idaho and West Virginia that banned biological males from competing in women's sports. The Idaho law was adopted in 2020. West Virginia followed a year later. The plaintiffs in Idaho, Lindsay Hecox, who is now 24 years old, went to federal court to challenge a state's law. Hecox, that's the trans athlete. I don't know if that's, am I supposed to read into that name? Yes, let me play it. Let me explain it to you folks, for those in the back. Yes, biological men pretending to be women sued, one in Idaho and one in West Virginia, sued to overturn those states' ban on biological men competing against girls. Okay? I mean, that's the... So Lindsay was not born Lindsay. Okay, I don't have... Anyway, and Hecox, I'm just funny to me. All right. Now, I started talking about this a little bit last hour, and here's I've got a couple of moments from the deliberations. No cameras in the Supreme Court, but audio is allowed to be recorded and broadcast. So in real time, we can hear the justices ask questions of the attorneys representing Idaho and West Virginia, and then the attorneys representing the plaintiffs, the transgender students who were banned from competing as women. When this issue, look, I just got to back up here, because my argument is that law follows public opinion. Law follows public opinion. A lot of people think, well, judges rule based on law and based on the Constitution and based on right and wrong. But already when you say right and wrong, you're already getting into what people think is right and what people think is wrong. So the Overton window, which is kind of considered it's a term for where acceptable public discourse lies, is constantly shifting. And one thing the left has been very, very, very good at over the last several decades is pushing that window more and more leftward, pushing social issues, pushing acceptance of all sorts of behaviors and things that, that were previously not part of public discourse. And, okay, I would just give you an example, a gay marriage, right? I read a story yesterday. It was something to do with mass deportations. And it was about Europe. It was about Germany specifically, talking about the idea of repatriation, of taking all of these crappy immigrants that have come into the country, quite honestly, because they're high rates of criminality, high rates of unemployment and public benefits use, non-integration. Do I need to go on? Those are all things you don't want immigrants who come to your country to be and to do. And, somebody was making the argument that, the public will never get behind this. And while they didn't mention the Overton window specifically, somebody wrote, hey, it was in the 1960s that people were actually arrested and imprisoned for being gay, for acts of homosexuality. It wasn't that long ago when consensus was that the law, that it was constitutional, in other words, to do that. Today, we look at that as a complete absurdity, right? I do. Outlawing homosexuality, a crazy idea. But I digress. Flash forward to today, we don't think this way, and it's because public opinion changed, and therefore the law changed. Now, the left is very good at advancing and shifting public opinion because they're incessant and because they get very little opposition from the right. And it has been actually in the Trump era. And the reason this is why the left is so pissed off at Trump and is so angry at any conservative influencer. As we remember today, Scott Adams, he being one of them, who effectively communicate and persuade people to shift their view. Because the left understands that the minute that the view shifts further right, the law will change. Many of you write me on a daily basis. By the way, sam@whatsrightshow.com. Again, went an hour without giving you my email. Shame on me. And tell me what? Sam, what are we going to do? These judges are ruling the world. The judges, they're terrible. They're horrible. And I'm with you. Some of these judges, hopefully, when we have 3 more years of Trump and then 8 years of J.D. Vance and then 8 years of Marco Rubio, there won't be any of these crazy judges left. There will be few and far between. That's my short answer. But that's one part of it. The other part of it is public opinion shifting. And the trans issue, I was listening to it today briefly. It was a very busy day at the office, unfortunately, so I didn't catch all of it. But the parts that I followed made it very clear that public opinion, even before I saw this headline in the Washington Post, public opinion has left the trans crazies. 5 years ago, it would be unthinkable to read a headline like that. In 2020, 2021, in the midst of all the, Trump getting out of office and all the explosion of liberal hysteria and Biden, coming in to save the day, shuffling in. If you went out and said, hey, I don't think a trans man, boy, read biological, a trans female, meaning a biological man, is, I don't think he should be competing against a she. You would have been called a transphobe, a bigot, horrible things. And by the way, what if they done to Riley Gaines? Riley Gaines has become the face of this movement, right? As a former athlete herself, who had to compete against, who was it? What was his name? Leah Thomas, whatever, right? That guy, dressed as a woman, right? And in comes the guy, and all of a sudden the guy on these swim teams just is killing every girl's record, and it offends our American notion of fair play and justice, right? I mean, it's not right. There's a reason why we have women's sports. There's a reason why we have men's sports. There's a reason why women compete against women. And the left went crazy and shoved this thing down our throats and succeeded briefly to shift that public opinion in their favor. But we pushed back. And in the era of Trump, in the era of social media, in a liberated, and I'll give credit to another person here that deserves endless credit on this front, and that's Elon Musk, for liberating Twitter and allowing actually people to really express their opinion. Because when you see that the opinion that you have is shared by other people, it's very powerful. And that's the beauty of what Scott Adams did. I mean, he brought people together, and you could see on the live stream on Rumble, you could see that there were other people following. You could see, and Twitter, you can see people getting likes and supporting things and following certain accounts. And all of a sudden you realize that what Riley Gaines is saying, what Scott Adams is saying, what Cernovich is saying, what Sam Mirejovsky is saying is being supported by other people. It's huge. And we start to realize it's not, and I think this is, by the way, this is, Robbie, why I'm so annoyed by the right-wing pundits that are out in it just for their clicks and for themselves and for their insane, because we are here, we are changing our country for the better by persuading people who in turn intimidate the court. Now, I'll explain what I mean by intimidating the court in just a moment. It's very, very important. And of course, a couple of clips from today's proceedings that you do not want to miss. Sam Mirejovsky here on the What's Right Media Network. More of the What's Right Show up next.
The Salmon Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Supreme Court Justice installed by Biden. She is not a bright lady. She does not belong on the court, but nonetheless gave her contributions today in the oral arguments. Asked this question. Now, I'm playing it here because I consider myself a reasonably smart person. I'm an attorney. I don't know what the hell she's trying to say. I don't even know what the question is.
To the extent that you have an individual who says what is happening in this law is that it is treating someone who is transgender but who does not have, because of the medical interventions and the things that have been done, who does not have the same threat to physical competition and safety and all of the reasons that the state puts forward, that's actually a different class, says this individual. So you're not treating the class the same, and you're not, how do you respond to that? In other words, the as-applied challenge essentially redefines the class, or one could think of it as that. And so what's wrong with that, number one, and how do you square that with our holdings in Caban, which Lair later described in this way? In other words, Lair suggested that Caban was establishing that as-applied challenges of this nature do exist.
As-applied challenges have nothing to do with anything here. This is not about this. This is very basic definition. Does the law protect discrimination based on transgender status? And what the fundamental issue here is defining what is a man versus what is a woman. Now, I know it's turned into a meme. I know it's, Matt Walsh has run with this and turned it into a movie. But I always tell you, you can change the meaning of the law if you change the meaning of words, because words have a certain definition, a certain meaning in law. So if you alter the language if you change the meaning of what a man is or what a woman is, all of a sudden you can completely turn the law upside down. Now, in schools and universities that accept public funds and across the board, you can't discriminate based on sex. And gender, right? I mean, male, female. So the question then becomes, what is the identity? And Alito absolutely nails it here with the questioning back and forth of the lawyer for Idaho.
Is it not necessary for there to be, for equal protection purposes, if that is challenged under the Equal Protection Clause, an understanding of what it means to be a boy or a girl or a man or a woman?
Yes, Your Honor.
And what is that definition for equal protection purposes? What does it mean to be a boy or a girl or a man or a woman?
Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I think that the underlying enactment, whatever it was, the policy, the law, we'd have to have an understanding of how the state or the government was just understanding that term to figure out whether or not someone was excluded. We do not have a definition for the court. And we don't take issue with we're not disputing the definition here. What we're saying is that the way it applies in practice is to exclude birth sex males categorically from women's teams. And
Okay, I just paused here. By the way, this is a lawyer for, not for Idaho, the state of Idaho, but for the plaintiff in Idaho, who is transgender and wants to be on, or wanted to be on a female team. What do you, wait, you don't have the definition? You can't define what a woman is. This is great because if you can't do it in court, then how is the court supposed to is supposed to weigh in on whether the law applies? Right? This is wild. Wow, sorry I interrupted here, but I had to cut in.
Teams, and that there's a subset of those birth sex males where it doesn't make sense to do so according to the state's own interest.
Well, how can a court determine whether there's discrimination on the basis of sex without knowing what sex means for equal protection purposes?
I think here we just know that we basically know that that they've identified pursuant to their own statute, Lindsay qualifies as a birth sex male, and she's being excluded categorically from the women's teams.
Okay, but birth sex male. A birth sex male. Okay, but that's not covered in the law. And so now what this does, what this would force to do, again, if the court decides in favor, and it sounds like based on where the questioning has gone, if the court decides on behalf of Idaho, if it has to, the ban on, they would have to go and change the law. They would have to go and change the equal, literally, they would have to go pass a law that protects. And I already said, even the Washington Post agrees that the law can't be changed. The mood of the country has left. These people are striking out. Oh, there was some good stuff. I mean, the response, by the way, to Ketanji Brown Jackson from the attorney and this is the attorney for Idaho, Alan Michael Hurst, is absolutely fantastic. Notice how he anchors in her own logic or illogic.
Certainly, take the second question first.
Yes.
Caban says nothing about as applied. I know that Lair says later this was an as applied case, but simply reading Caban, it does not say that. It simply applies intermediate.
No, I understand, but those two cases were in juxtaposition with one another,
Yes.
and Lair comes out the way it does, distinguishing Caban on the basis that it's an as applied challenge, and we in Lair have a facial challenge, and it's basically the same facts. So if you're right, those two cases can't come out the way they do.
I don't think so, Your Honor. Again, Lair was actually briefed as a standing argument of maybe you might be able to argue that this law is overbroad, but you individually are not in the overbroad part, and therefore you don't get to challenge it. The court didn't use standing language, like express standing language in the opinion, but that is the logic of the opinion.
Brilliant, right? And what he's basically saying is the very case that Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is citing doesn't apply at all in this instant scenario. Like, it doesn't apply. And she just, I've gone to law school with people like this who get, they don't really know what they're talking about, and they want to make ideological points. So they just throw a lot of words out there. It's okay if you don't follow it. Trust me. Most logical people don't either. Sam Mirejovsky here. This hour of the What's Right show brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. 1-800-304-2000. That's the number. The only law firm to trust. Spread the word. Don't be a victim twice. 800-304-2000. Because you deserve what's right. Sam Mirejovsky here, behind the What's Right microphone. The What's Right show is your place for common sense conservatism, Monday through Friday here on the What's Right Media Network. Now, let's see. Can I translate a little bit of Trump? This morning he drops a Truth Social tweet, a post where he says he's done talking to the Ayatollahs until the killing stops. Doesn't want to talk to Iran. People are going, well, he's all over the map. He's encouraging the protesters. He's telling, this morning, told the Iranians help is on the way. Back and forth, back and forth. All right. Here's my translation of it. Trump is muddying the waters and being all over the place on purpose to keep them guessing. Remember in 2015, 2016, again through his first term in office, when he was out of office, in the interregnum period between 2021 and 2025, Trump always said the same thing. He criticized dummy politicians, particularly presidents, who would always say, this is what we're going to do, and then do it. Right? So why are you all of a sudden expecting that Trump is going to lay out his battle plan on Twitter? Because why? Because he's going to drop some clues like he did for Venezuela. But, the week before Trump took decisive action there, he was getting criticized left, right, and center for being wishy-washy on the subject of Venezuela, which made it all so much funnier when the left then exploded in a cacophony of criticism when Trump actually acted. So that's what's cooking here, all right? I don't know what's going to happen. And this morning, I was on Alan's Stock, and my good friend Alan asked, what he thinks was going to happen, what the U.S. ought to do. And I said, listen, if there is a government building that can be taken out, and it can be given as a threat, you start hanging protesters. They're going to hang protesters today. Maybe you already have. You hang one political prisoner, and we're going to bomb the Ayatollah's tomb. I'm okay with that. I'm pretty certain that we can establish dominance in their airspace quickly, just based on, I don't know how quickly they've been able to rebuild since their last lashing. Boots on the ground. Alan said boots on. I'm not interested in that, and I don't think the country is either. Now, you see the CBS News report, Nora O'Donnell last night, already doing the work of the Ayatollahs once again. My gosh, these people will not stop. She had Reza Pahlavi on, who is the crown prince, the heir apparent to the throne of Iran, who is a leader in exile of sorts of the Iranian diaspora. And in my view, somebody who would be quite good to bring in as a leader of Iran, somebody who has a fair amount of credibility. And certainly every Iranian I talk to has either neutral or very positive thoughts about him. But here's the question that CBS News poses to the basically the alternative leader, opposition leader, who has gone out and go out in the streets, protest. And this is important to do. I think it's important to do. People have listened to his call. Listen to the question.
And as you are urging people to protest and go to the streets, the death toll is rising in Iran. This violent crackdown continues just as it has in past attempted revolutions. I mean, is it responsible to be sending citizens in Iran to their deaths? Do you bear some responsibility?
No, do you bear some responsibility, sir? Listen to the answer. This is great.
As I said, this is a war, and war has casualties. In fact, in order to preserve and protect and minimize the death toll, minimize innocent victims yet again be killed by this regime, action is needed. The regime is going to try and brutalize its citizenry as it has always done. But we are in a fight for liberation. I didn't ask the people to come to the streets to fight against the regime because I wanted so. They asked me to step in to help them and to be their voice on the outside world, to do everything that we can so we make this uprising successful this time. And I think we have some serious leaders that understand what is necessary, that understand the ask of the Iranian people, and are responding to that. I think President Trump is responding to the call that the Iranian people have. The Iranian people have heard his words. They are naming streets after him in Iran. There's a difference. They know he's no Barack Obama or Joe Biden. And that's why they do have a higher expectation.
Yeah, again, the left thinks that everybody on our side, on the freedom side, is a mind-numbed robot. They can just be wound up and told what to do because that's kind of how they operate. Do you share any responsibility for this? Do you share responsibility for people? Now you're telling them to go out on the streets to protest, and he goes, I mean, you think these people were just sitting around completely satisfied with their lot in life? Delighted to be in an Islamo-fascist, tyrannical state? To be brutalized for 45 years by their oppressive government, and then suddenly they heard some rumblings that some guy living in California was like, hey, time to go out in the streets, and then they acted? How is this different from Iraq? Well, there was no uprising in Iraq against Saddam Hussein, was there? Was there a popular uprising? What about Afghanistan? Not really. Of course, there were dissatisfied people living, but it just absolutely irks me on this. Now, what's my preference? I keep coming back to this. My preference is a Western-aligned Iran. You know, one of the most silly things that you will see on the internet today are people saying, but the Shah was a tyrant too, meaning Reza Pahlavi's father. He had secret police and he beat people up and everything. And to some extent, that's true. But again, what is it that we want? Are we trying to spread democracy here? This isn't George W. Bush. What's good for America? To box in our enemies, to weaken our enemies. What's good for you and me living here in Las Vegas or in Colorado or in Maine? Is it to put China and Russia, mostly China, into a corner? Do we want less material support going to terrorists around the world? Do we want, again, I live in Las Vegas. I'm thinking about this selfishly. The Strip, where I go with my kids from time to time, the tourist corridor in Las Vegas is a terror target. You have to use your imagination to know that's true. Iran is a state sponsor of terror. The present country is. If we have an opportunity here to help a little bit a popular uprising against a terrible government that funds terrorism and wreaks havoc around the world and helps our adversaries like China. Well, hell's bells. Let's go for it. And then I relate to these people. I do. The Czech resistance in November, September, October, November of 1989, it culminated in big public protests. The police opened fire into the crowd. Now, it wasn't as nearly big of a bloodbath as what we're seeing in Iran. And I don't know what the number is. I don't know if it's 1,000 people, it's 500 people, or it's 10,000 people. Difficult to judge. It's a big country. These protests, these riots are occurring in a number of cities. Who knows what the real number is? Just no idea. But in Czechoslovakia, which is my parents' country, I remember we got some word of people being shot, of people dying. And then it escalated. And as with many of these countries in Eastern Europe at the time, the governments just collapsed. They collapsed under their own weight. And it happened quickly. It happened decisively. A lot of people didn't know it was coming. Internally in the country had no clue. In the media, the same liberals in the media that are covering now for the Islamists, were covering for the Soviet Union, were covering for the Eastern Bloc communist dictatorships. I personally identify with the Iranians immensely here and pray for them, because I remember as a 9-year-old boy going to Prague, visiting for the first time, seeing my parents' liberated homeland. And somewhere still at home, I have a little bit of wax that I was a collector of things as a kid, and I peeled a little bit of wax and put it in a bottle from a memorial to one of those student protesters that was slain. You think the Czech people had any weapons to fight the government? Today, Tucker Carlson would get up there and say it was the Jews that made it all happen, or some such stupid thing. No, they literally dug out stone blocks, little paving stones that are ubiquitous across Prague, sidewalks and streets, and dug those out and used those to throw them at the riot police. They took down communism with that. The government had bullets. They literally had rocks. But there was way more people with rocks than there were guys with guns. That's ultimately what happened. If you're sitting around, if you're actually buying into this thing that it's all just Israel-led, it's all just the CIA, my God, I mean, of course Israel's helping this. Of course Israel doesn't want an Islamic Republic of Iran. Of course Israel would love to have the Shah. If you think that this government isn't deeply corrupted and hasn't been absolutely tyrannical, if you're getting stuck in some moral equivocation, well, I don't know what to tell you. By the way, I'll play a clip here of Tucker Carlson talking to his idiot brother to really drive home this point. You do not want to miss this. Sam Mirejovsky here on the What's Right Media Network. I'll be right back. Good heavens. I didn't really know this guy existed, really. Buckley Carlson, Tucker Carlson's brother, on Tucker Carlson's podcast yesterday. Oh my gosh. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Folks, let me say this quickly. If you get in an accident, Salmon Ash injury law, tell your friends, tell your family. Don't go at it alone. Don't get caught in the trap. Don't lose money. Stand up for yourself. Offices in Nevada and California, 800-304-2000. Sam and Ash injury law. No money out of pocket. Okay? Doesn't cost you a penny. No recovery, no fee. There's no result. You don't pay. 800-304-2000. Because you deserve what's right. This guy, this is a barely tepid body temperature in the IQ department. Buckley Carlson, talking about the great disappointment of living as an American. Which, again, I have trouble saying these kind of things because I think this is the greatest country in the world. Of course we're not perfect. Of course we've done some bad things, quote unquote. All right. But are we like the Chinese? Are we moral equivalents of the Chicoms? Of the Iranian Islamo-fascist Republic? Well, Buckley takes it even a step further. I guess he was named after William F. Buckley Jr. Is that right? This is horrifying.
The most important thing that went on in our lives as we were growing up, the most important enduring conflict was the Iron Curtain and communism. And I remember talking with you and others all the time about those poor people who live in the Soviet Union who have no access to real news. And further, they had been taught as a society terrible things about America and Americans. And specifically, we used to also talk after the Iron Curtain came down, had the same attitude about North Korea. Like, here are these poor, emaciated captives who can't leave their own country, who think these terrible and untrue things about Americans. And it was only a couple of years ago that I suddenly realized I had this epiphany. We're North Korea. We are North Koreans. And so much of what the government has told us throughout our lives about big events and small events are simply not true. Not just massaged, but like 180 degrees from truth and reality.
What the literal hell is going on in this man's brain? And Tucker, of course, is, got the look, oh, yeah. Mental patient. Now, this is like explaining that, Charlie Kirk isn't actually a racist, right? You kind of, dare I have to explain that in the U.S., if you go against the Biden regime, and hear me out on this. If you go out, here I'm knocking my microphone, I'm so excited about it. You go against the Biden regime. Yeah, they're going to show up, no knock raid at 6 a.m. This happened, right? This is true. No knock, 6 a.m. raid on your house, arrest you in front of your kids because, you went on January 6th, you went through an open door somewhere in the Capitol. You're going to arrest you. You're going to be thrown into solitary confinement. And then you're going to be handed up, and not diminishing it in any way, shape, or form. Trust me, it's not the point. And you're going to be eventually going to be exonerated, okay? And given a full pardon by the rightful president who comes in and rights the wrongs because we had an election and we threw out the tyrant. I am sorry. You must have literal horse manure for a brain if you think you can even, we're just like North Korea. Retard. I'm sorry. Again, you have to understand where I'm coming from, folks. You have to understand what my parents went through to get to America. They had to flee a communist regime. My mother had to start over, not once, not twice, but basically 3 times. She went to France, met my father, moved to Holland, the Netherlands. Then together they moved to the U.S., all in a quest for freedom. Those of you who listen to this program know about their story. I haven't talked to my parents about this little clip because it just came out here overnight, but I can tell you pretty much with great certainty that they probably think that this is the most idiotic thing they've ever heard from a so-called conservative. Be wary of false prophets, my friends. There are people among us on our side who absolutely have their brains erased. Oh, I don't, I mean, I don't know. What are they going to say? Oh, we faked the lunar landing. Everything is a lie. The Jews were behind the JFK assassination. I don't know. Maybe the lunar landing was faked. I don't. It doesn't make us North Korea. It doesn't make us the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, the Soviet Union. Stalin sent peasants to their deaths so he could sell their grain. They were starved on purpose so he could sell their grains to buy armaments from the West and factories from the West. I mean, where do I even, the gulags? I get it. I get it that Biden did some bad stuff. But this? You're diminishing our country and our Constitution doing this. All right, folks. Scott Adams, rest in peace, brother. Fly high. We've got it from here. Each and every one of us need to carry on that torch, my friends. Trust me. We can each play a role in shifting that Overton window, the window of public opinion toward common sense, and thereby getting the law on the right side. Mirejovsky here on What's Right Media